Well, UCLA is suddenly in a head coaching search. Chip Kelly, spur of the moment, just decided to dip out, and he's going to head over to the Ohio State Buckeyes, take a coordinator role. So now UCLA has options, and to try to discover which direction they're going to go, which trajectory they're going to go, time will tell. But we're going to go through some of the options today, potential options, honorable mentions, and see what we can get into and who we think might be the best candidates. So make sure that you drop your comments below, who you think it might be, who your candidates are, or anybody we missed, and we'll definitely get into those. But first things first, my name is Justin Adams. I am a host here at the Big Ten Show. In the middle is my co-host Sunny Verma, and on the end there joining us is JR. I'm gonna I moved us. I'm gonna flip you on just a second. But JR, how you doing today? Thanks for joining us. And if y'all have watched shows before, y'all have seen them. So what's going on, JR?
Not much. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on, guys.
Appreciate you being here, man. Thank you so much. And let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So first things first, I'm just going to go into a little bit of Jarman's comments about the situation. And, what from what he said Chip called Friday to inform them, they enforced the $1.5 million buyout. But here's some of just to preface everything, here are some of the things he said he's looking for in the next head coach. So, he wants somebody who's a leader and permanently for their program. He said he wants somebody who's going to be here. I don't know where else they're going to be. Integrity as a teacher, competitor, CEO, embraces NIL, recruiting, donor relations, development, and a CEO with a passion for that. Okay, so I guess I'm going to start just a quick little discussion here. How good of a job is UCLA, or how bad of a job is it? And I'll just run through some downsides that I thought of. They haven't recruited well in a long time. The fan support is lacking. Facilities are outdated, and whoever takes this over, it's going to be a long haul ahead to rebuild this. Upsides, weather. What do y'all say?
I think at its peak, it's probably a middle tier Big Ten job. I can easily think of 6 or 7 jobs that are probably better, but with USC right across the street, I just think that there's a ceiling to UCLA. Obviously it's such a basketball school to begin with that I think it's a good job, maybe top 35, 40 in the country, but I'm not sure it's an elite job.
Right. Yeah. Jared, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say it probably hovers somewhere around 9 to 11 in the Big Ten, which, let's be honest, the Big Ten has a ton of really good jobs in college football in it. So being 9 to 11, that's nothing. You don't look at that and say, oh, that's a bad job. You guys are right. I would put it probably top 30, top 35. But, you have the recruiting base around there, which is excellent for you. I think personally, the NIL struggles and stuff like that they've had are more of a result of Chip Kelly just not being very good at that stuff. I think that the money and things like that would be there. Let's not forget that Chip Kelly had a coaching salary pool for his assistants of over $10 million. So it's not a place struggling for money at all times. I think they are struggling a little bit right now, but you get the right coach in there, they'll be fine.
Yeah, but in regards to him not recruiting well in a long time, that makes their talent composite, not very good, which puts them even more, in a situation where it's going to take longer. I think this is a 3 to 5 year rebuild to get them kind of in the maybe upper middle pack of the Big Ten going forward.
By the way, it's a long process. Shout out to me in my Big Ten rankings show right before this one, who had UCLA at number 16 or 15 in the Big Ten. I may have called this one.
You can't shout out yourself. You had Illinois at number 4. Anyways, getting into a few of the options. First, I'm going to go through the betting odds here that were put out yesterday. So Jeremy Chadwell, leader at plus 300. Deontay Lynn, plus 350, David Shaw plus 450, Tony White plus 650, Fleck is out, and then other plus 900. So let's go ahead and get into them a little bit. Let's go ahead and start with PJ Fleck. We'll start with you, JR. What are your thoughts on the PJ Fleck tweet? Do you think he is for sure out of this? And what is your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, based on what Jarman said from his comments, I think PJ Fleck fits that just about perfectly. Maybe the NIL, we have a little bit of question there on how he does with that at Minnesota, just because I've never heard of, how invested he is into it. He could be very much so. He could be not very much at all. I've not heard that aspect of it. But other than that, sounds like the type of guy that you would want from those comments. Now, that tweet does make it seem like he's probably done with it, or he's trying to get more money out of Minnesota, something like that. But in today's day and age, you never take a coach for his word. We just had Steve Clinkscale tell his entire players 2 days before he left, hey, I'm coming back and I'm here. 2 days later, boom, I'm going to the Chargers to be with Jim Harbaugh. So, You can never trust coaches anymore because they say one thing and they do something else. I mean, you can say, oh, I'm staying here, but guess what? You get offered $2 million more than what you're making now, you're going.
It's a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Sonny, what do you say? We can't hear you. Muted.
JR, a noted Ohio State fan, had to get that little jab in on the Michigan Wolverines. So I respect that. I absolutely respect that. There's not, we all joke around about PJ having like the best agent in the world. Anytime that there's a job opening, he's always mentioned. And, some of us, he's not exactly liked by a lot of people that outside the teams that he coached. But I thought UCLA was like the perfect job for him. Like LA seems like it would eat up PJ. PJ would eat up LA, the way he dresses. He just seemed like he would have been perfect for the job. I'm still surprised by that tweet. The only thing that could, only thing I can think of is, Minnesota's supposed to be pretty decent next year, and he's already being paid something like $7 million. Mm-hmm. $7 million in Minneapolis is going to go a pretty long way compared to, whatever he was going to make out in California. So maybe the pay bump wasn't, as significant as he needs. He's got an ego. So it's not like he would have taken a pay cut for the job. So in my opinion, that tweet was either, hey, never mind, they're not going to reach my price. Good at Minnesota. That's kind of seems like the cool thing to do with the coaches now. We saw a half a dozen coaches do that with the Saban opening. Mm-hmm. But if he's out, he's out. He would have been my first phone call if I was UCLA. But there's still a couple of good options left.
And I'm not sure how big of an issue the money is, because I think Chip Kelly was supposed to make like $8 million this year, 8.5 million or something like that. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't like PJ Fleck as a coach, as a human being. He just kind of annoys me overall. So
Nebraska fan doesn't like the Minnesota coach.
It's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. No, but I don't know. I feel like he's definitely out there, but like JR said, he does fit exactly what he said he wants. So, all right, let's go ahead and move forward. Let's go ahead and get into Tony White. Tony White, Nebraska defensive coordinator, really turned the defense around, brought the 3-5 to Nebraska. He's 44 years old. He's a UCLA alum, linebacker, played linebacker there, was a grad assistant there, and then went over to be the defense coordinator for ASU and then Nebraska. He was a Broyles Award nominee for the top assistant in the country this past year. But the thing about Tony White is he was a hot commodity on the coaching market earlier this offseason. Nebraska threw $1.6 million at him, restructured his contract, and he decided to stay. So my thing on it is, if he restructured his contract, decided to stay when he had all those opportunities, I don't know how easy it would be for them to pry him away. I know he went to school there, but he's in a much better situation in Nebraska in terms of fan support, NIL. And then I feel like if he continues where he's going, he will have plenty of opportunities elsewhere to maybe end up in a better situation. And we've always seen that the alum thing doesn't always check out. And then last thing, there was a recruit, Keona Wilhite, defensive end, that a week before National Signing Day, Nebraska said they were out on him. He was a lock to go to UCLA. And then a week before, all of a sudden, the crystal ball started coming in for Nebraska. He was flipping Nebraska when Nebraska was out of the recruiting. That led me to believe that they knew that Chip Kelly was going to be gone, and Tony White recruited him over to Nebraska. I don't know why, if Tony White had interest in the job, he would bring Keona Wilhite to Nebraska when he left UCLA because of that situation. So let me get y'all's takes on it, though. I'm a Nebraska fan. I'm a little bit biased here. So, and, wishful thinking on my part. But we'll start with you, Sonny. What do you think about Tony White?
I think Tony White would be a no-brainer. I know you mentioned he had other opportunities, but the other opportunities were jobs like USC defensive coordinator. That's a different
coaching too. No, he was rumored for a lot of head coaching jobs. We thought we were going to lose him.
Okay,
he wasn't going to make a lateral move.
When you talk about head coaching jobs, you're talking about an alum. For me, I think he would probably triple his pay. I don't think he would get the $8, $9, $10 million, but that would be another reason UCLA would probably be interested in Tony White. He's obviously coached in the Big Ten at this point. He's kind of familiar with what he's about to go against next year. And one of the main things I think that would stand out about Tony is he bleeds blue and gold. You'd assume, right? Being an alum. And I don't think we kind of kicked off this episode talking about it, how the UCLA job isn't exactly very exciting, and it's tough to sell that job. I think Tony White, being a former Bruin, would be able to show the enthusiasm, show the excitement to potential recruits, and really hype up becoming a UCLA Bruin. So I think if offered the job, I think he would take it. I just don't know if UCLA is such a, it's kind of a, how do I say this nicely, like a smug program that they may not want to take a chance on a first timer.
Yeah. No, I totally can see that. JR, what do you think?
I think the key is kind of the last part you said there, Sonny. I don't know if I would use the word smug, but like a confident program that they kind of want to show themselves when they get into the Big Ten. And what's the worst way to show yourself? By getting one of the best teams in the Big Ten to take your head coach to be their coordinator. So I think one of the reasons why
hang on.
Really,
JR is cutting out for a second, so we're going to mute him 1 second. JR, come back in.
Is that any better?
Yeah, what were you saying?
I was just going to say that, it would make sense for UCLA to want to try and snatch or poach a head coach from another Big Ten team. But in reality, Tony White is only a defensive coordinator. So that doesn't fit their whole, we have power and we're better than these other Big Ten teams when you poach a defensive coordinator versus a head coach. So as much as I think Tony White would do a good job at UCLA, and he's probably somebody that they should pursue, I think the ego aspect of it, I don't see UCLA going for him unless he just shows a whole lot of interest and really wins them over in interviews. Because the whole aspect is like the outside, perception of the program, right?
Yeah. And the big thing is, Tony White's a defensive-minded coach. UCLA had a top 15 defense, last year. So I wonder if they're going to want to steer more offensive-minded coach so they can kind of develop that a little bit more and get the offense, up to the defensive speed in terms of efficiency. So, all right. So next one we will go into here is USC defensive coordinator Deontay Lynn. 34 years old. Like I said, USC defensive coordinator, formerly at UCLA. And so what are your thoughts on Deontay Lynn? We'll start with you, JR.
I think Deontay Lynn, I don't think he would go for it. He's got his eyes set on the NFL, and unfortunately for UCLA, USC defensive coordinator job is going to be more likely to get you ready for the NFL or maybe not get you ready, but is going to give you better, odds to get to the NFL rather than head coaching job at UCLA. Now, I say that with Jeff Hafley, going to the Green Bay Packers after being at Boston College, which is a much worse job, in my opinion, than UCLA. However, I could definitely see a scenario where USC's defensive coordinator gets hired to go to the NFL after 2 or 3 seasons of good work there, rather than the UCLA coach getting hired to go to the NFL after probably would take 4 or 5 seasons to do well there.
Right. Sonny?
I think this is a good example of how Chip Kelly kind of screwed over UCLA, with just this last minute deciding to take it's the worst kept secret in the world that he was interviewing for jobs all off season long. But I think if Chip had jumped a couple months ago before Lynn had taken that USC job. UCLA could have had Lynn in-house and basically, just hired him up and made him head coach. And then I think he may have taken that role. But at this point, he went across the street. Obviously, I completely agree with JR. I think his long-term goal is to become an NFL defensive coordinator or head coach. And I think USC, with all the glamour that comes with that position, he's content. He's going to be making very good money. And it's at 34 years old, he's a shining star when it comes to the field. I think he's going to hold off for the NFL.
Yep. And, there was also a breaking news report. Shout out to Sunny for coming across this earlier. Not sure the legitimacy of this, but as of 6:10 p.m. on today, the 10th, it said we had heard there was a mystery sitting coach that was a candidate. We've discovered it's Stanford head coach Troy Taylor. The word is that Martin Jarman plane will go from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico to the Bay Area to meet with Taylor. So we'll leave with you, Sunny, since you're the one who found the news. What was your instant reaction to that? And what do you think overall about him?
I'll be completely honest. Most of my attention goes on Big Ten. I know very little about him. All I know is, he had a pretty good career before he got to
Sacramento
Stanford.
State.
And from what I read, he knows how important the NIL game was. And the only reason he took the job at Stanford is they promised him that they'd kind of spend more money and make a financial commitment. But outside that, I'll be completely honest, I don't know much about him.
Jared?
I mean, I don't know a ton about him either, but you asked me Stanford head coach, what were they, like 3-9 last year?
3-9,
he may come from a good FCS program or something like that, but at the end of the day, I mean, does he get less prestigious than that? I mean, we just talked about Tony White and wanting to be prestigious with that hire and why they might not go in that direction. Stanford, they haven't been good in football since David Shaw was 9-4 several years ago. So I don't see it. I guess there's a possibility if the name is being floated out there. He must really kill it in the interview if he gets it. That's all I gotta say.
Yep. And let's and Troy Taylor, for what it's worth, I don't know a lot about him either. Just in what I saw from a little short, just digging in there, was Sacramento State fans loved him, and they were distraught when he left to go to Stanford. So, but Stanford fans seem to be indifferent about the whole thing, and so it's one of those things where he did succeed at a small school, but how confident is UCLA that he's going to be able to come in and turn this around? I do not know. Like you said, I believe he would have to interview well, or they would just have to be completely out of options. But speaking of Stanford, I don't think we talked about David Shaw yet. So this is the last one. We'll wrap it up with David Shaw. Then we'll go into our honorable mention. So let's get into a little bit. JR, what are your thoughts on David Shaw? I'll go through a quick little profile. 51 years old, offensive coordinator experience, NFL experience. He's coached for the Eagles, Raiders, and Ravens for different roles, wide receiver coach, etc., those type of things. He did win a lot at Stanford at points, 3 consecutive Rose Bowls, but wasn't able to make a bowl game his last few seasons. It kind of didn't end well. And fun fact, though, I found that his son plays at UCLA as a wide receiver too. So let's talk David Shaw. What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, his son's a walk-on wide receiver, I think, and again, this is one that just doesn't make very much sense to me. He's been removed from football for a while. It's not like he's got some kind of job right now that's well known or anything. And even like you said, when he was at Stanford, he wasn't doing all that well at the end. I feel like the only reason he had success at Stanford was because he kind of rode the coattails of Jim Harbaugh after he left, because Jim Harbaugh had a really good program there. Probably some of the best football that Stanford has played in recent years. So, I don't really see it. I understand the possibility of him with the walk-on wide receiver son and the connection to the area, possible recruiting, those kind of things. But at the end of the day, UCLA, they have to aim higher than somebody like David Shaw. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves back here again 3 or 4 years from now.
Sonny?
I completely agree with that in the sense where I think David Shaw would be an uninspiring hire, but I don't think it would be a train wreck. I think you hire Shaw to guarantee you finish with at least 5 or 6 wins next year. I think his floor is higher than some of the other more green candidates we've kind of discussed. Obviously, coaching on the West Coast is a different animal than folks in the Midwest or from the East Coast, and not a lot of people can adjust to that. David Shaw obviously has some experience, coaching Stanford as long as he did. Like he's got relationships with high schoolers already out there. I think Shaw could be like an easy transition guy. Hey, we want to aim high. All the good coaching candidates are gone, so let's hire Shaw with the idea that there's probably a good chance you're replacing him in about 3 years or so.
Yep. And, before we get into our little bit of honorable mentions, and then we're going to predict who we think, is going to land the job. One of the ones that I firmly believe is just nothing burger, and I don't know his name's being thrown out, is Pete Carroll. I mean, he's 70 some odd years old, and I've seen him in a couple articles. If he wants a guy who's going to be there for a while, why is he going to get somebody who's in his 70s, and is going to be able to lead his team? I've seen it in 2 different articles. And so, Sonny, why are you smiling?
Because we're about to go to honorable mentions, and he was going to be the first name I was going to mention.
Oh,
if I'm UCLA and I have all that money thrown to the side, I have no idea if this guy wants to coach again. Zero clue. But you can do with Pete Carroll what UNC did with Mac Brown. The guy, he knows all the schools. He knows everything about LA. If you want to build excitement about UCLA, Pete Carroll, everywhere he goes, there's excitement follows him. So, again, I didn't want to mention him as one of the main candidates just because I have zero idea if he wants to coach, much less in the college level. But now, before PJ Fleck, before anybody, Pete Carroll would have been my first phone call.
The reason I say that, and JR, I'll get your thoughts on this in a second, but he said he was very adamant that they're looking for a leader permanently. He said permanently for our program, and somebody that's going to be here. That leads me to believe that they're not going to hire a 72-year-old Pete Carroll. But JR, what do you think?
I think you're kind of ageist there, Justin. I mean, come on. People can coach way longer than 72 nowadays.
Telling me. That's all I got to go.
Our president's like 75, right? All right, give it.
We see how that's.
No, I think you guys are right. He's just too old, and it's nothing against him to say that he can't do it nowadays or anything. You never hire somebody with the intention of him only being there for like 2 or 3 years. I guess I could see it in this situation where it's like after the coaching carousel and not all the names are still around. So if he wants to do it, I think you give it to him just to give yourself some time. But I can't imagine he would want to go to UCLA.
No, and it's different nowadays in the modern transfer portal NIL world. Like, you lose a coach now, back when Mac Brown was like, it wasn't this chaotic. And nowadays, Pete Carroll's gone, you lose your whole foundation there, depending on who you hire. So it's like restarting again in this college landscape. That's how it's been.
Yeah, but it's like, if anyone can generate interest in the next year or two with the transfer portal, with NIL, with donors, I think Pete Carroll's the guy. I know he's 72. But, we've all seen, he doesn't act like he's in his 70s. He acts like he's in his, 40s, 50s with the amount of energy the guy has.
Yeah, but he's in his 70s. I mean, at the end of the day, he's 72 years old.
Right. But, I mean, you can have a situation hire a Pete Carroll, and then, maybe he's made enough money at this point. Then why not? And Justin's not going to like this, so I'm talking to you, JR. Pay Tony White $2 million a year to become the defensive coordinator with the head coach in waiting title.
Oh, we're playing some mental gymnastics here.
And then all of a sudden in 2 years or 3 years, whenever Carroll's done, hand the reins over to Tony. And
Tony's not going to move over for associate head coach.
Okay, Mr.
But I'm just saying, you run the risk. If Pete Carroll coming in for 1 or 2 years doesn't do much, but it starts them and then sets them back as soon as they lose Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll recruited a lot of those players. What if the guy that comes in, the players don't necessarily like him, or don't like the style, they don't agree with it, or they just like Pete Carroll because of what he brings to the team? That's my thing. Is it that is a potential to blow up in their face and set them back even more if it doesn't work. So that's my only hesitation with it. But
I think it's a good plan, Sonny. Like, I think logistically, like, it makes sense. But unfortunately,
it's too late in the process.
You and I know that we can't trust coaches, and the other people that know it better than us is coaches know you can't trust coaches. So Tony White is not going to go somewhere else where it's like, hey, we promise you're the head coach in waiting, and then he has a defense outside the top 100. It's like, yeah, you're not in waiting anymore.
But even if you think about it, this is just another scenario. It's like, wait, you let Tony stick around in Nebraska for a year, for 2 years, but then if he's
what does this look like? You think he's going to sit there and wait and just? No, I'm talking about
if he's playing in Nebraska. You love to remind everyone how Nebraska is the holy grail of college football.
When did I say
Tony White would not entertain another gig. So let's say Nebraska kills it for the next 3 years. Tony White produces successful season after successful season. Then all of a sudden, in 3 years or whatever, then Tony White becomes an easy no-brainer name to hire as your head coach. And, you have that new excitement of bringing the alum, the guy who's number one on everyone's board to, come, continue the excitement that Pete Carroll.
They have 96 hours, and you think they're going to plot some plan with Tony White to stay at Nebraska and waiting so when Pete Carroll comes and leaves, he can be the head coach?
No, I'm saying this could be a scenario
where over there
if Tony White's not ready yet, then let him confirm. He's had, obviously a couple of really good years in a row. He's going to get paid very handsomely in Lincoln. So 2-3 years, and then offer him the job when the fan base can be more easily sold on him.
Don't take jobs for 3 years. We just talked about we can't trust coaches. Trust us. We'll give you the job in 3 years. He's in it.
You're not hearing me what I'm saying.
I'm listening.
You just hear Nebraska.
Keep doing your seasons at Nebraska, and then in a couple of 3 years we'll come hire you back. Is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying UCLA doesn't tell him anything. All I'm saying is you hire Carroll,
but then you're ready, still hoping that he hasn't picked up a head coaching job elsewhere.
It doesn't matter. If he coaches at a smaller school, he's still going to jump to UCLA.
You think
unless
so?
you think he's going to get a Big Ten job.
I disagree. I think you're reaching, and I think there's a reason why, but I just think you're reaching. That's a lot. They have 96 hours to get this done. That is a lot of stuff. They need to worry about getting a coach before they worry about what coach they're going to get next in 3 to 5 years.
We move on. You're not.
I'm going by what the athletic director said, where he said that they want a guy who's going to be there, and quite simply, he doesn't fit that criteria.
All right.
Pete Carroll
does. We got.
But JR, what's your first honorable mention?
My first honorable mention is Tommy Rees, the old offensive coordinator at Alabama, the current tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns. He's a name that's come up recently. UCLA insiders felt the need to say that he was offered the Ohio State offensive coordinator job, but he turned it down. I can tell you that's a lie. That's a terrible, terrible lie. But so they're obviously trying to prop him up, and they want the fan support there. And if you ask me, it sounds like, based off what they were saying, somebody who knows NIL. He was just at Alabama. He was at Notre Dame. Somebody who's young and will be there a while. He's 31, 32 years old or something like that. He's young. He can be there for a while. So I feel like this is something where, they could possibly hire him, and he's coming from the NFL. He was at Alabama. He has that prestige that they want. And honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like they look at it and it crashes and burns. It crashes and burns. It makes them look good for now, and that's all they need.
Yep. And I'll throw my first one out there, and mine's wild. I saw this somewhere, but Eric Bieniemy was thrown out there. Eric Bieniemy, former running back coach for the Bruins. He was a recruiting coordinator there. He has NFL experience, but in 2020 he turned down the Colorado offer. But this is a completely different circumstance. He's out of a job now. He was with KC before, so it's a matter of, did he turn that down because he wants to stay in the NFL, or what does that look like? But yeah, Eric Bieniemy was a name I saw, and I'm like, that actually has some, just due to the ties, that has some interesting. But I know that one's pretty out there. So, Sonny, what's your second one?
There's two names that I kind of like if I'm the Bruins AD. First one is, I actually texted a buddy of mine who is a Bruin fan, and he mentioned Tom Herman. And the more I thought about it, that does kind of make sense. It's a guy who I'd imagine is going to get a huge pay bump. I'm sure he'd love to get back into the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It didn't work out in Austin, but I think he's going to be a guy who's going to get a chance to have a nice power P4 job again in his career. So I think Tom Herman would be a pretty good pick. And the other one was, so this one, it might not work because he could be Chip Kelly light, but I can't believe Dan Mullen's not hired anywhere. I think that Florida Gators team was a thrown shoe away from taking down what I consider the best college football team I've ever seen play a couple of years back. Now, I know he's not much of he doesn't like recruiting all that much, and UCLA just got a taste of that with Chip Kelly. But I think even for Dan, like, UCLA's culture doesn't need a winner. They just need you to be good and decent. And I think Dan Mullen, when it comes to X's and O's, is one of the best in the country. Now, I know he's being paid handsomely, and he's a very good TV analyst right now, so he probably isn't interested. But for me, he's the guy who, if I'm an AD of a program who isn't football crazy like the SEC is, he'd be one of my first phone calls.
All right. Well, JR, do you have any more honorable mentions?
I'll say one thing about Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen is the Jay Wright of college football. He's never coming back to the game. He's got too sweet of a gig. Yeah. He hates recruiting, just wants to draw up X's and O's and stuff like that. If anything, he's probably going to go to the NFL someday, but I can't imagine he'll ever come back to college football. The other name that I've seen, I don't really think it's likely, but I figure I'll throw it out there, is Justin Wilcox from California. That school, they're going over to the ACC. It's going to be a lot with the travel and things like that. And if UCLA does have interest in him, and Cal's not been terrible by their standards here recently, and so he could be somebody with the head coaching experience that could come up, and it has enough prestige that, like, look, we're hiring away from an ACC school, when in reality we know it's not really a great football program, but he's a head coach, and it would kind of stick it to a former Pac-12 team. So,
for sure, yep. And the other name that I saw in one place thrown around was Jason Candle from Toledo, 11-3 in 2023, great recruiter, 44 years old, so fits a lot of what they're looking for, but hasn't won a lot in Power 5, hasn't won in Power 5 or Power whatever it is 2 now. So that one might be like one of those worst case scenarios. So I guess we'll go round table with our predictions, and we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and start with the JR. JR, what is your prediction? Who do you think is going to be the UCLA head coach?
It's going to be Tommy Rees. Bring on Tommy Rees. Let him be the coach at UCLA. I can't wait for it. I think it would be hilarious. Not hilarious. I don't want to try to demean the program or anything like that, but I just think it would be a very interesting hire, and I could see it, I could see it going very bad, or I could also see them doing pretty well too. Do I think they're going to turn into a contender? No, but I could see them, doing a good job in the Big Ten and finishing in the top half of the league a number of times if he's there. So, I think Tommy Rees is probably your most likely guy right now.
Sonny?
Yeah, I think there's only one home run hire left, and that's Tony White. I think
I heard your plan, dude.
Wait, right now or 3 years from now?
No, I think when you talk about a guy who, again, if I'm the UCLA AD, you want to build excitement within the community.
That's not what he said.
I'm saying if I'm the AD,
we're predicting.
I want to build excitement for UCLA brand of football. I want to, excite the donors, reinvigorate the fan base. What more? And I want a guy who's going to sell UCLA. And I think there's no one that's going to do that more than Tony White. He would be beloved by the community coming back. I think he's ready. I think, and this is a compliment to him, I think he's a very, very good coach. And I think the allure of going home would be too much for him to. I think if they offered it to him, he would take it, no doubt. I think that's the move. I don't know if UCLA is smart enough to do it because of, again, their little attitude that they think they're better than a lot of other schools. But I think that's the no-brainer hire.
And I do want to say, I want to go on a limb and say, I would not be surprised if he does get hired there. However, I think you're a little off the mark. But I guess my prediction, I honestly think it's going to be David Shaw. That was just my overarching feeling is I think he's kind of like one of those middle of the road type of options that they may have to land just as is on such short notice. And maybe if they get turned down from a Tony White, I don't feel like he'd be their first option, but I think that might be where they land. So we'll see. And then we'll also see if there's any smoke in the coming days, the Troy Taylor stuff. But, he said it's going to be a 96-hour turnaround. And so we're going to be hearing something very, very soon. And we could all be wrong. We could be completely off the mark. We could be dead on for all I know. But it's going to be exciting to see in the coming days. Anything else before we conclude here, Sunny or Jer?
No, not really. It should be fun.
Nope.
Every time we think the coaching carousel is done and over with, here comes a new opening and new content to talk about.
Yep.
I mean, we're all probably going to be wrong. At the end of the day, this is 30 hours in or something like that, and they want to get it done in 96. We're not even at the halfway point yet. So the way these coaching searches go, even the most plugged in UCLA insider versus us, we have the exact same shot of getting it right, I feel like, because I see insider after insider guess things, do things. The only time I've ever seen an insider get the job right, days and days before, was Boston College. And that's because it was Bill O'Brien, Al Washington, or Paul Christ. You tell me who's going to be the coach there. Those three.
Exactly.
And it's it's obvious. And this one, it's not obvious who it's going to be because there's so many different factors. One of us could just luck into it and get it right. But at the end of the day, this is going to just keep changing and changing and changing. And UCLA is going to have to hire somebody soon. It'll be interesting to see who it is.
Yeah. To your point, it's just you'll see top 10s lists like Nebraska. When the coaching spot was open, there was Matt Rule wasn't on half the lists. So it's one of those things. They're going to keep it close to the vest. So we'll see in the coming days. But if you like the content here, please consider liking and subscribing. We appreciate everybody's support thus far. And get ready for, if your team hasn't been presented here yet, just get ready. We're going to keep the content coming. We're going to be doing program overviews of more teams. So stay locked into the content here. JR, you can also go follow JR on the Big Ten Huddle. I will have links in the description. Great show over there. I was doing it for the month of January. Had a great time on there. So go check that out. And if there's nothing else here, we're going to go ahead and sign off, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.